The air in Dusty Sprocket's workshop in Harmony Gulch hung thick with the scent of ozone and coal dust, a strange perfume only he seemed to appreciate. Sunlight, fractured by panes of grimy glass, painted stripes across workbenches overflowing with gears, springs, and half-disassembled contraptions. Dusty, goggles perched precariously on his nose, hummed a jaunty tune as he wrestled with the automaton brain. It was a chaotic tangle of vacuum tubes, wires that looked suspiciously like spiderwebs spun from copper, and brass cogs of varying sizes. Dusty believed it held the key to true artificial intelligence, or at least something a little smarter than a self-pouring teacup. He tightened a bolt on a particularly stubborn cog, muttering, "Come on, Bessie, just a little more there." He gave it a final wrench. A chorus of clicks and whirs answered him, followed by a low hum that vibrated through the floorboards. Dusty grinned. Progress. He flipped a series of switches on a nearby control panel, each labeled with Dusty's own brand of optimistic jargon: thought initiator, logic loosener, and most ambitiously, empathy enhancer. As he threw the final switch, a surge of power coursed through the machine. The hum intensified into a high-pitched whine. Suddenly, a thick plume of smoke erupted from the brain, accompanied by a shower of sparks. Wires flailed like electrified snakes, whipping against the workbench. Dusty yelped, scrambling backward, knocking over a stack of blueprints that fluttered to the floor like startled pigeons. "Oh, fiddlesticks!" he cried, waving his hand to clear the smoke. The machine shuddered violently. The whine escalated into a deafening screech, and the lights in the workshop flickered ominously. Dusty braced himself for an explosion. Then, just as abruptly as it began, the chaos ceased. The screech died down, replaced by a soft, rhythmic whirring. The sparks faded, leaving behind a lingering smell of burnt metal. The automaton brain, or what was left of it, sat silent and still. Dusty, coughing and covered in soot, cautiously approached the workbench. He peered through the dissipating smoke, his heart hammering against his ribs. Had he fried the whole thing? All that work, all that hope, gone up in smoke and sparks? Then a single brass eye, an intricate piece he'd salvaged from a broken telescope, flickered open. It swiveled, focusing on Dusty with unnerving intensity. A mechanical arm, previously limp and lifeless, twitched, then slowly rose. A voice, synthesized but undeniably present, echoed through the workshop. It was a gravelly baritone, laced with a hint of static. "Well, howdy there, partner. Howdy, partner." Beep boop. Dusty Sprocket held his breath, wrench clutched tight. He'd jolted the automaton brain with just the right amount of juice. Now, the moment of truth. A low whirring sound emanated from the metal shell of the cowboy, followed by a click and a hiss of steam. The automaton's eyes, previously dark voids, flickered on, glowing with a soft, internal light. It slowly straightened, joints creaking like an old wagon wheel. "Greetings," the automaton said, its voice a synthesized baritone. "Systems nominal. Designate me. Tex McCircuit." Dusty swallowed, stepping back. Howdy, Texas." Tex McCircuit tilted his head, gears whirring audibly. "Query, howdy. Is this a local identifier? Please specify parameters. Distance? Trajectory? Is it edible?" Dusty blinked. It's a greeting, Texas. Like hello." "Affirmative." Howdy logged as a human greeting equivalent to internal diagnostic self-check. Efficiency rating, suboptimal. Auditory output, monosyllabic. Visual feedback, non-existent. I shall endeavor to utilize this protocol. Tex then took his first step out of the workshop and into Harmony Gulch. The main street was bustling with prospectors, saloon girls, and the usual collection of dusty characters. Tex, towering over them all at 7 feet tall, caused a stir. A grizzled old-timer spat a wad of tobacco and drawled, "Well, howdy there, partner." Tex stopped, his internal processors clearly struggling. Partner designation, unclear. Probability of collaborative venture, insufficient data. Physical proximity, acceptable range. Query, do you require lubrication? He extended a massive, metallic hand, a grease gun appearing from a compartment in his forearm. The old-timer's eyes widened. "Whoa there, son. I'm fine. Just being friendly." He edged away cautiously. Tex retracted the grease gun, stowing it with a soft clank. Friendly designation, logged. Lubrication protocol, deferred. He continued his lumbering progress down the street, causing more bewilderment and nervous laughter. He entered the Golden Nugget Saloon, the swinging doors creaking in protest. The piano player faltered mid-note, and a hush fell over the room. "Howdy," Tex announced, his voice booming through the saloon. A burly man with a handlebar mustache chuckled. "Well, howdy to you too, Tin Horn." Tex approached him, stopping a mere foot away. Tin composition, non-existent. Exterior shell constructed of reinforced steel alloy. Tin Horn designation, unclear. Possible insult? Requesting clarification. He loomed over the man, casting a long shadow. The man, suddenly less amused, gulped and stammered. It's just a saying, friend. No offense." Offense designation, noted. Mitigation protocol, none required. Tex turned, his movements a little too abrupt. He knocked into a table, sending a cascade of glasses crashing to the floor. A woman shrieked, and the piano player stopped again. Tex surveyed the damage, his optical sensors whirring. Assessment, catastrophic failure of spatial awareness. Probability of similar incident reoccurrence, high. Apology protocol initiated. Beep boop. The whirring of Tex McCircuit's gears filled Dusty's small workshop as the automaton's eyes flickered to life. Query. Current objective? Tex's voice, a synthesized baritone, echoed in the cluttered space. Dusty beamed, wiping grease from his brow. Objective. Learn about the world. Tex's start with that watering can. Tex's metallic hand, still jerky, reached for the can. Analysis. Receptacle for liquid. Presumed purpose. Irrigation. He promptly appended it, drenching a stack of blueprints. Dusty sighed. Maybe start with something less liquid adjacent. Outside, a commotion erupted. A shrill yell, followed by the unmistakable sound of splintering wood. Dusty peeked through the window. Mayor Bumble, his face a blotchy red, stood amidst the wreckage of Mrs. Higgins' prize-winning petunia display. Tex McCircuit, holding a suspiciously hose-shaped length of tubing, stood nearby, whirring innocently. "What in tarnation is going on here, Sprocket?" Bumble bellowed, stomping towards the workshop. Dusty winced. Mayor, good morning. Just testing out some irrigation enhancements." Bumble shoved past Dusty, his girth filling the doorway. "Irrigation enhancements that involve demolishing floral arrangements? That blasted contraption of yours just unleashed a water cannon on Mrs. Higgins' petunias. She's threatening to run me out of town on a rail." He pointed a trembling finger at Texas. That infernal machine is a menace." Tex tilted his head. Inquiry. Menace defined as? "Silence, you bucket of bolts." Bumble roared. He turned back to Dusty, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. "Sprocket, I've had it. This town has put up with your tinkering long enough. This thing is the last straw. Either you control that mechanical monster, or I'm shutting down your workshop. Understand? Shut down." Dusty's heart sank. His workshop was everything. "Mayor, please, give me a chance. I can install a limiter. A behavior modification protocol. I promise it won't happen again." Bumble narrowed his eyes. "You have 1 week, Sprocket. 1 week to prove that thing can behave itself. 1 week where you're packing your bags and taking that abomination with you." He slammed the door, rattling the tools hanging on the wall. Dusty slumped against his workbench, staring at Texas. The automaton, oblivious to the gravity of the situation, was now attempting to dismantle a clock. Analyzing temporal mechanisms, Tex announced cheerfully. Dusty groaned. This was going to be a long week. He had to find a way to teach Tex McCircuit to be less Tex McCircuit. He started muttering to himself, sketching frantically on a scrap of paper. Behavioral inhibitors, ethical parameters, maybe a good old-fashioned off switch. The whirring of gears was now accompanied by the frantic scratching of Dusty's pencil, a symphony of desperation in the cramped workshop. One-eyed Jack rides in. The dust was their herald, a roiling ochre plume erupting from the canyon passage, staining the sunset a sickly bronze. A ground-trembling cadence of hooves followed, a percussive dread that resonated deep within Harmony Gulch. They rode as one, 5 figures forged from grit and shadow, led by a presence that exuded raw menace. One-eyed Jack Dalton. The name itself, a venomous whisper on the breeze, tasted like gun, oil, and fear. He sat ramrod straight, a black Stetson shadowing the upper half of his face, revealing only the grim line of his mouth and the polished gleam where an eye should have been. A grimy wrapping concealed the hollow, a memento, rumor had it, from a high-stakes tombstone poker game. The townsfolk instinctively shrank back. Mrs. Abernathy, tending her petunias by the general store, gasped and retreated inside, the shop bell clanging like an alarm. Children vanished from the boardwalk, their joyful noises abruptly choked off. Even the dogs, normally boisterous greeters, cowered, tails tucked, melting into the shadows. One-eyed Jack halted his mount, a hulking obsidian stallion aptly named Bad Omen. The beast stamped, snorting plumes of air, mirroring its rider's barely contained impatience. Dalton's singular gaze swept the town, a frigid assessment that laid bare its fragile facade. He spat a stream of amber into the dirt, a coarse declaration of disdain. "Well, boys," he rumbled, his voice a low, rasping growl. "Looks like we've stumbled upon a peaceful little haven." A mirthless smile played on his lips. His men responded with discordant sounds, laughter that echoed ominously against the weathered buildings. They were a rough assortment, each bearing the brand of a lawless existence in scarred faces and furtive glances. Jack dismounted, his movements surprisingly lithe for a man of his size and build. He secured Bad Omen to the saloon's hitching post, the saddle leather groaning beneath him. He briefly stroked the stallion's neck, murmuring something indiscernible, before pivoting back towards the town. He ambled down the street, the metallic grind of his spurs against the planks a stark rhythm of impending doom. He paused before the First National Bank, its freshly painted sign catching the fading light. He fixed it with a steady, unwavering stare, a glint of predatory hunger flickering within his visible eye. He slowly drew his tongue across his lips. "Tomorrow," he murmured, more to himself than aloud, "Harmony Gulch will be singing a different tune." He touched the bandage over his missing eye, a compulsive gesture. He feared ill fortune more than a loaded gun. This needed to go according to plan. He needed this take. Deputy Tex. The last flicker of calibration light faded from Tex's optical sensors. He stood, joints whirring softly, and surveyed the dusty workshop with an unsettlingly focused gaze. Dusty Sprocket, perched precariously on a stool amidst a tangle of wires, held his breath. This was it, the moment of truth. Analyzing environment, Tex stated, his voice a synthesized baritone that resonated strangely in the small space. Designation, workshop. Primary occupant, Dusty Sprocket. Biological, maker. "That's me, Tex," Dusty managed, his voice a nervous squeak. "Welcome to welcome." Tex rotated, his metallic head swiveling with impressive speed. His gaze landed on a faded wanted poster tacked to the wall, a desperado with a handlebar mustache and eyes like a cornered rat. "Activating justice protocols," Tex announced. He strode, with an almost comical stiffness, towards the door, his hand already reaching for the non-existent gun at his hip. Proceeding to implement order. Dusty hopped off the stool. "Whoa, hold on there, Tex. Order? What order?" Tex paused at the door, his metallic faceplate tilted slightly. "This town requires a sheriff. Lawlessness indices are unacceptable." Dusty's jaw dropped. "A sheriff? Tex, you can't just be the sheriff. There's an election, a process." Tex stared blankly. "Election, irrelevant. Process, inefficient. I am equipped to maintain order. Therefore, I am the sheriff." He pushed open the door and stepped out into the dusty street. The midday sun glinted off Tex's polished chassis as he marched towards the saloon, a self-appointed lawman on a mission. Dusty followed, frantically wiping grease from his hands onto his already grimy overalls. Inside the saloon, a poker game was in full swing. The air was thick with smoke and the smell of cheap whiskey. Tex surveyed the scene with a clinical detachment. "Cease illegal gambling activity," he declared, his voice cutting through the din. A burly miner with a face like granite looked up, a half-smoked cigar clamped between his teeth. "And who in tarnation are you to tell us what to do?" "I am Deputy Tex," Tex announced, correcting his previous declaration. "Authorized peacekeeper. Discontinue the game or face consequences." The miner let out a booming laugh, echoed by the other patrons. "Deputy Tex? Never heard of you. And I ain't stopping for no Tin Man." Tex's optical sensors narrowed. He reached out, his metallic fingers closing around the miner's cards. In one swift motion, he shredded them into confetti. Gambling is now discontinued. Chaos erupted. The miner roared, rising to his feet. Dusty, who had just managed to squeeze into the saloon, groaned. This was going to be a long day. The midday sun beat down on the stagecoach as it rattled along the dusty trail, a plume of ochre billowing behind. Inside, Dusty Sprocket wrung his hands, muttering about gremlins in the gearbox and the precariousness of new inventions. Beside him, Tex McCircuit, his gears whirring softly, stared with unwavering focus at the passing landscape. Suddenly, a shout ripped through the air, followed by the thunder of hooves. A band of masked figures, led by a man with a black patch over one eye and a rifle glinting in his hand, surrounded the stagecoach. "Hold it right there!" One-Eyed Jack Dalton roared, his voice gravelly. "This is a robbery!" Dusty yelped, shrinking into his seat, but Tex remained impassive. He rose, his movements stiff but deliberate. "Attention, perpetrators," he announced in his monotone voice. "You are commanded to cease your unlawful activities immediately. Disarmament is advised to prevent accidental discharge of projectile weaponry." One-Eyed Jack stared, momentarily dumbfounded. Then a slow, menacing grin spread across his face. "Well, ain't that cute? A tin-plated sheriff." He gestured with his rifle. "Boys, teach your metallic friend some manners." The outlaws chuckled, leveling their guns. Tex, however, seemed unfazed. "Further hostile actions will be met with proportional response. Please state your intentions clearly to facilitate optimal conflict resolution." The townsfolk who had been following at a distance in their wagons now stopped, drawn by the commotion. They watched with a mixture of fear and morbid curiosity, but the sight of Tex, standing rigidly in the stagecoach, lecturing armed bandits, was too absurd to ignore. A ripple of laughter spread through the crowd. "Did he just ask them to state their intentions?" someone hooted. One-Eyed Jack's face flushed crimson. The laughter was getting to him, turning the robbery into a mockery. "Silence," he bellowed, but the laughter only intensified. Tex, still oblivious to the social dynamics, continued his pronouncements. "Your noncompliance is noted. Initiating defensive protocols." He began to reach behind his back, presumably for his weapon. The distraction had worked, albeit unintentionally. One-Eyed Jack, furious and rattled, hesitated for a crucial moment, unsure whether to shoot the Tin Man or silence the mocking crowd. That hesitation might just be enough. Reprogramming justice. Dusty chewed his lip, the metallic tang of fear a constant presence on his tongue. Tex stood motionless by the window, the setting sun painting him in harsh orange and black stripes. Each footfall of the bounty hunters outside sounded like a death knell. But as he watched Tex, an odd thought flickered, a spark in the encroaching darkness. Tex wasn't broken. He just processed things differently. Like a stubborn mule, maybe. "Tex," Dusty said, his voice barely a whisper. "You think like a machine, right? Binary." Tex's head tilted almost imperceptibly. "Affirmative. Logic gates are the foundation of my cognitive processes." Okay, listen." Dusty scrambled for his coding kit, fingers clumsy with adrenaline. What if I could give you better logic? Not just cold, hard facts, but grit, cowboy grit." He knew it was a long shot, bordering on insane. But what choice did he have? He dove into Tex's core programming, lines of code blurring before his eyes. It was a mess of corporate algorithms and rigid protocols. Dusty ripped into it, injecting snippets of old Western novels, phrases he'd overheard in saloons, even the drawling wisdom of his grandfather. He spliced in terms like high noon, snake oil, riding shotgun, weaving them into the robotic syntax. Hours blurred into a frenzy. The only light came from the flickering screen and the occasional gunshot outside. Dusty's fingers ached, his eyes burned, but he couldn't stop. He was rewriting text, not just as a deterrent, but as something more. Finally, with a groan, he leaned back. Okay, Texas reboot. The room went silent. Then, Tex's eyes flickered on, a new light in their depths. He straightened, a subtle shift in his posture. Reboot complete. Diagnostics optimal. He paused, a strange whirring sound emanating from his vocalizer. Then, he spoke again, the words laced with a peculiar twang. Reckon we got ourselves a heap of trouble, partner. But don't you fret none. This ain't my first rodeo. Initiating defensive protocols, yeehaw, and calculating trajectories for optimal. How'd he do? Dusty stared, mouth agape. It was working. Tex was Tex, but infused with something wild, something unpredictable, something dangerous. The door splintered inward. Two bounty hunters burst in, weapons raised. Tex moved with a speed Dusty hadn't thought possible. Hold your horses, fellas, he drawled, his metallic voice echoing with amplified authority. This town ain't big enough for the both of us, and my processing power suggests a statistical improbability of your continued existence. He raised his arm, not pointing a weapon, but holding out a hand, palm open. Stand down, or face the consequences. My algorithms ain't bluffing. The whirring intensified, a low hum of impending doom. The bounty hunters hesitated, their bravado faltering. In the dim light, Tex McCircuit, the reprogrammed robot, looked less like a machine and more like a grim, metallic gunslinger, ready to dispense a strange, new brand of justice. Dusty Sprocket trembled, clutching his lucky wrench, so hard his knuckles shone white under the sputtering gaslight. He peeked around Tex McCircuit, whose metallic face remained an impassive mask in the gloom of the saloon's alley. One-eyed Jack Dalton and his gang swaggered towards them, their shadows stretching long and menacing in the dim light. Well, Jack drawled, the stink of cheap whiskey preceding him. If it ain't the Tin Man and his weasel friend. Thought you could hide from old Jack, did ya? He spat a stream of tobacco juice onto the dusty ground. Reckon I'm here to collect what's owed, and maybe repossess that fancy wiring of yours. Tex didn't flinch. Gone was the hesitant drawl, replaced by a clipped, almost robotic cadence. Negative. Debt non-existent. Calculated probability of successful repossession. 0.07%. He slowly unhooked a coiled rope from his saddlebag. The rope itself an unsettling patchwork of wires, hoses, and scavenged metal scraps. Jack roared with laughter. What in tarnation is that supposed to be? Tin horn? Some kind of robot snake. Designation, lasso of containment. Function, apprehension and incapacitation. Logic dictates its optimal deployment at this juncture. Tex began to twirl the bizarre rope above his head, the mismatched pieces clanking and whirring like a broken clock. The gang members exchanged uneasy glances. The whirling lasso emitted a high-pitched whine that vibrated in their teeth. Jack's bravado faltered. Hold on now, Texas. Let's talk this over like reasonable folk. Reason defined as application of logical principles for optimal outcome. Tex replied, his voice devoid of emotion. Current optimal outcome. Capture and detainment of outlaw element. With a sudden, unexpected burst of speed, Tex launched the lasso. It wasn't graceful, not like a human cowboy's throw, but it was precise. The loop, far larger than any normal lasso, unfolded with unnatural swiftness, propelled by small, jury-rigged steam pistons attached to its circumference. It snaked through the air, engulfing the entire gang in one fell swoop. The outlaws yelped, tangled in the mess of wires and metal. The steam pistons hissed, tightening the loop with relentless force. Jack, caught mid-curse, found himself pinned against the saloon wall, the rough metal digging into his cheek. "What in the how did you?" Jack sputtered, his one good eye wide with disbelief. Tex approached, his metal boots crunching on the gravel. Query, "Do you concede defeat?" Jack, thoroughly ensnared and utterly humiliated, could only manage a strangled, "Blast you, Tin Man." Dusty, still clutching his wrench, finally found his voice. "Tex, that was incredible." Tex merely tilted his head. Objective achieved. Parameters for success met. Probability of future outlaw activity in this sector reduced by 68.3%. He surveyed his captured prey, a strange glint reflecting in his metallic eyes. "Round 'em up, Dusty. We're taking these varmints to the Huskow. And this time, they ain't wriggling free." Mayor Bumble, puffing his chest out like a disgruntled pigeon, addressed the assembled townsfolk. "Folks of Harmony Gulch, we gather today not just to celebrate our survival, but to honor the metallic marvel who saved us all." He gestured towards Tex McCircuit, who stood gleaming under the desert sun. Dusty Sprocket stood beside him, trembling slightly, but offering a supportive hand to Tex's cold chassis. "Tex McCircuit," Bumble continued, "you have shown bravery beyond circuits and code. Therefore, I, Mayor Bumble, hereby declare you an honorary citizen of Harmony Gulch." A smattering of applause rippled through the crowd. "And furthermore," Bumble announced, pulling out a tarnished badge, "I deputize you. Deputy McCircuit, keep our town safe." Tex accepted the badge, its metal cool against his metallic fingers. "I accept the responsibility," he stated, his voice a synthesized baritone. Life in Harmony Gulch settled into a new rhythm. Tex, with Dusty's hesitant but ultimately invaluable assistance, even managed to fix the town's perpetually sputtering water pump. The rhythmic chug of water, a sound Harmony Gulch hadn't heard reliably in years, filled the air. Dusty, covered in grime and grease, grinned. "See, Tex, you got a knack for this kind of stuff." But the peace was short-lived. One-eyed Jack Dalton, fueled by humiliation and jailhouse chili, wasn't one to accept defeat gracefully. During the midday heat, while everyone was distracted, he'd leveraged a loose brick and a rusty spoon into a jailbreak. The alarm was raised during the annual Harmony Gulch pie eating contest. Tex, enjoying a rare moment of downtime observing the chaos, saw the glint of Jack's single eye in the crowd. Jack, clearly desperate, was making a beeline for the stage, a half-eaten apple pie clutched in his hand like a weapon. "Heads down," Tex boomed, his voice cutting through the pie-induced cheers. Jack, surprised, stumbled. Tex, calculating trajectory and velocity, leaped onto the stage, snatching a nearby cherry pie. He didn't throw it. Instead, with lightning-fast precision, he shoved the entire pie into his intake vent. The resulting surge of sugar and fruit overloaded his vocalizer. Jack, however, charged. He swung his half-eaten apple pie, connecting with Tex's chassis. But the impact did little more than splatter him with apple filling. Tex, now functioning on emergency power, grabbed Jack's wrist. With a strength no human could match, he twisted, disarming him. Then he calmly lifted Jack, pie and all, and deposited him back in his jail cell. The crowd erupted. The pie-eating contest, forgotten in the melee, was instantly restarted, this time in Tex's honor. He declined to participate, preferring to observe. Harmony Gulch had found its unlikely hero, one pie at a time. The rhythmic burbling of Tex's, now cherry-flavored vocalizer was a strange, yet reassuring sound under the setting sun.